A wealthy woman walks into a supermarket expecting a normal shopping trip. But moments later, two officers stop her, their eyes filled with suspicion. They question her, humiliate her, and treat her like a criminal without knowing who she really is. What happens next shocks everyone. The woman they tried to embarrass is no ordinary shopper. She is one of the most powerful billionaires in the country, and she's not about to stay silent. By the time the truth comes out, the entire police department is in trouble. Forever, before we start the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today, and if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new one. A luxury black SUV pulled into the parking lot of a mid-sized supermarket. The driver, a sharply dressed woman in her early 40s, stepped out, adjusting her sunglasses. Her name was Vanessa Cole, one of the most successful, self-made billionaires in the country. But today, she wasn't wearing a designer dress or being followed by cameras. She was dressed in simple jeans, a plain t-shirt, and sneakers, just another regular shopper. Vanessa walked into the store, grabbing a cart and casually browsing the aisles. She liked doing this once in a while, getting a taste of normal life without people recognizing her. As she reached for a carton of milk, she noticed two police officers watching her from a distance. She ignored them and continued shopping, but soon one of them approached her. "Excuse me, ma'am," Officer Bradley said with a smirk. "Can I see some ID?" Vanessa frowned. "ID? Why?" "We got a report about a suspicious person in the store," he said, glancing at her casual outfit. "You don't look like you belong here." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "And what does that mean?" Officer Bradley crossed his arms. "People like you don't usually shop in places like this. What are you really doing here?" Vanessa let out a small laugh, realizing exactly what was happening. "So, because I'm dressed casually, I'm suspicious." Before the officer could respond, his partner, Officer Jenkins, walked up, holding a pair of handcuffs. "Let's not waste time. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us for some questioning." Vanessa's expression hardened. "On what grounds?" "You look like you might be shoplifting," Officer Bradley said, glancing at her cart, which only had a few items. "People like you come in, take things, and think they can get away with it." Vanessa's patience was running thin. "You didn't even check the cameras, and I haven't even left the store. You're making assumptions." Officer Jenkins stepped forward. "You can argue all you want, lady, but we have authority here." Vanessa looked at them, shaking her head. "You have no idea who you're messing with?" Officer Bradley scoffed. "Oh yeah? And who exactly are we messing with?" Vanessa smirked, but she didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started dialing. "Put that away," Officer Jenkins snapped, reaching to snatch the phone from her hand. But before he could, Vanessa took a step back and held up a finger. "I'd think twice if I were you," she said calmly. Officer Bradley rolled his eyes. "You think calling your boyfriend or some lawyer is going to get you out of this? Lady, we run this town." Vanessa didn't even acknowledge him. Instead, she turned slightly away and spoke into the phone. "Hey, it's Vanessa. I need you at Fresh Mart Supermarket. Now." She hung up, slid the phone into her pocket, and folded her arms. "Who did you just call?" Officer Jenkins demanded. Vanessa gave them a cool look. "You'll see." The officers exchanged glances. Bradley smirked again, shaking his head. "Let me guess. Some low-level attorney who'll come in here and try to educate us on the law? Save it. We know exactly what we're doing." Vanessa simply smiled and leaned against the shopping cart, looking completely unbothered. A few minutes passed. The officers were getting impatient. "All right, enough games," Jenkins said, stepping closer. "Either come with us now, or we'll—" Suddenly, the sound of screeching tires filled the parking lot. A line of sleek black SUVs pulled up in front of the store, and within seconds the doors flew open. Several sharply dressed men and women in suits stepped out, moving with purpose. The store manager, who had been watching from the side, gasped, "Oh my God, that's—" Before he could finish, the supermarket doors swung open, and in walked a tall man in a navy suit, flanked by 2 security personnel. His presence alone commanded attention. Officer Bradley's smug expression wavered. "Who the hell is this?" Vanessa smiled. "This," she said, turning toward the man, "is my chief of security." Officer Jenkins took a nervous step back. "Security? For what?" The man in the suit looked directly at the officers, his jaw tight. "For her." He pulled out an ID and placed it right in front of their faces. Officer Bradley squinted at it, and as soon as he read the name, his face went pale. Vanessa Cole, Billionaire. Owner of Coal Industries, one of the largest corporations in the country. Officer Jenkins felt his throat go dry. "Wait, you mean you—" Vanessa leaned in slightly, her voice calm but sharp. "I own this supermarket chain, every single Fresh Mart in this state and beyond." The officer's eyes widened in shock. The entire store had fallen silent. Customers, employees, and even the store manager were watching in stunned disbelief. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Now, I suggest you explain why you thought it was okay to harass and humiliate one of your own bosses." Officer Bradley's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His arrogance had completely vanished. Officer Jenkins took a shaky step back, sweat forming on his brow. The entire supermarket was silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Vanessa tilted her head. "I'm waiting." Jenkins swallowed hard. "Look, Mum, there must have been some kind of misunderstanding." Vanessa let out a dry laugh. "A misunderstanding? You accused me of shoplifting without evidence. You tried to detain me for simply existing in my own store, and now you want to call it a misunderstanding?" Officer Bradley's confidence was gone, but he still tried to salvage the situation. We were just doing our jobs." "Your job?" Vanessa repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Your job is to serve and protect. Instead, you humiliated me in front of all these people because I didn't look like I belonged here." She took a step forward, her eyes locked on them. "Tell me, officers, if I were a white woman dressed in yoga pants, holding a latte, would you have treated me the same way?" Neither officer answered. Vanessa smirked. "Exactly." The store manager, who had been nervously watching the situation unfold, suddenly stepped forward. "Ms. Cole, I had no idea it was you," he stammered. "I would have—" Vanessa held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't," she said. "This isn't about who I am, it's about how you treat any customer who walks into this store. Do you think this is the first time something like this has happened?" She turned and gestured toward the employees and customers watching. "How many others have been profiled like this? How many have been treated unfairly, just because you decided they didn't belong?" Murmurs spread through the crowd. A few customers nodded, sharing knowing looks. One older black man near the produce section spoke up. "Happens all the time. You just finally caught 'em." The officers looked like they wanted to disappear. Vanessa sighed and shook her head. "This is exactly why I make it a point to experience the real world outside my office, because this," she gestured between them, "is a problem." The chief of security stepped forward, his voice firm. "Officers, I think you should hand over your badges." Both men snapped their heads toward him in shock. "What?" Jenkins stammered. "You can't—" Vanessa cut him off. "I can," she said coolly, "and I will. Because you see, in addition to owning this store, I also have very good friends in the mayor's office, and trust me when I say, I'll be making some calls." Officer Bradley's face drained of color. "Ms. Cole, please, we made a mistake." Vanessa stared at him for a moment. Then, with a small shake of her head, she said, "No. I made a mistake by giving people like you the benefit of the doubt." Jenkins and Bradley looked completely defeated. They knew their careers were over. Vanessa turned to her security team. "Get them out of here." As the officers were escorted out, the crowd broke into applause. Some employees smiled, relieved that justice had been served. The store manager wiped his forehead, still in shock at what had just happened. Vanessa turned back to the customers and staff. "From now on," she said, "this store and all my stores will have new policies in place. No more profiling, no more discrimination, and I promise if anyone is mistreated, I'll personally handle it." Another round of applause erupted. As Vanessa walked out, her security detail following close behind, she glanced over her shoulder at the stunned store manager. "Oh, and one more thing," she said with a smirk. "Check your emails. You'll be getting a memo soon about some major changes." With that, she stepped into her luxury SUV, her job for the day complete. The officers had tried to humiliate her. Instead, they had humiliated themselves. The officers were dragged out of the store, their faces burning with humiliation as customers whispered among themselves. Some even recorded the moment on their phones, already uploading the footage to social media. Vanessa turned to her security team. "Get them out of here." As the officers were escorted out, the crowd broke into applause. Some employees smiled, relieved that justice had been served. The store manager wiped his forehead, still in shock at what had just happened. Vanessa turned back to the customers and staff. "From now on," she said, "this store and all my stores will have new policies in place. No more profiling, no more discrimination, and I promise, if anyone is mistreated, I'll personally handle it." Another round of applause erupted. As Vanessa walked out, her security detail following close behind, she glanced over her shoulder at the stunned store manager. "Oh, and one more thing," she said with a smirk. "Check your emails. You'll be getting a memo soon about some major changes." With that, she stepped into her luxury SUV, her job for the day complete. The officers had tried to humiliate her. Instead, they had humiliated themselves. The officers were dragged out of the store, their faces burning with humiliation as customers whispered among themselves. Some even recorded the moment on their phones, already uploading the footage to social media. Vanessa exhaled, shaking off the frustration as she walked toward her SUV. But just as she reached for the door handle, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't answer, but something told her to pick up. "Vanessa Cole speaking," she said. A deep, authoritative voice responded. "Ms. Cole, this is Mayor Richardson." Vanessa smirked. That was fast. "Mayor," she greeted smoothly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I just saw the footage of what happened at your supermarket," the mayor said, his tone serious. "It's already going viral. This is bad for the city." Vanessa chuckled, unlocking her car door. "No, Mayor, this is bad for you and your police department. Those officers work under your administration, don't they?" A heavy silence filled the line. Then the mayor sighed. "Ms. Cole, what do you want?" Vanessa slid into her seat, crossing her legs. "Accountability." The mayor hesitated. "I can fire those officers immediately, but—" "I don't just want them gone," Vanessa interrupted. "I want a full investigation into racial profiling within your department. I want new policies, proper training, and real consequences for officers who abuse their power. And I want it publicly announced, on all platforms." The mayor sighed again. "That's a lot." Vanessa leaned back, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "It is. But let's not forget, I'm Vanessa Cole. My company employs thousands of people in this city. I donate to schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. If I pull out, the local economy takes a serious hit." She let her words sink in before adding, I own half this town, Mayor. You don't want me as an enemy. A pause. Then, reluctantly, the mayor said, Fine, I'll make it happen. Vanessa grinned. Good choice. She ended the call and set her phone down, glancing at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Today started as an ordinary shopping trip, but it had turned into something much bigger. She wasn't just a billionaire, she was a powerhouse, and now the entire city knew it. As Vanessa sat in her SUV, she took a deep breath, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The mayor had caved, just as she expected, but she wasn't done yet. She turned to her chief of security, Marcus, who was seated beside her. Make sure the press gets a full report on today's incident, she instructed. I want every news outlet covering this. Marcus nodded. Already on it. The footage is spreading fast. People are outraged. Vanessa smirked. Good. Let the world see what happens when you judge someone by their appearance. Just then, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her assistant, Jade. Vanessa answered on speaker. Vanessa, you won't believe this, Jade said, excitement in her voice. Your name is trending everywhere. The video from the supermarket. Over 1 million views already. People are calling you the Billionaire Avenger. Vanessa chuckled. Billionaire Avenger? I like that. There's more, Jade continued. Sponsors are reaching out and civil rights organizations want to collaborate with you on police reform. Even some celebrities are speaking up, praising you for taking a stand. Vanessa's smile widened. She hadn't expected this much momentum so fast, but she wasn't about to waste the opportunity. Set up meetings with the civil rights groups, she said. If we're going to push for real change, we need to do more than just fire a few officers. You got it, Jade said. Then, hesitantly, she added, Oh, and there's one more thing. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. What? The police department just released a statement, Jade said. They're trying to spin the story, claiming it was a misunderstanding and that you overreacted. Vanessa's expression darkened. Oh, they want to play that game? Jade sighed. It gets worse. They're saying you refused to cooperate and that the officers were only following protocol. Marcus cursed under his breath. Unbelievable. They're trying to cover their tracks. Vanessa clenched her jaw, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. Fine, she said, her voice dangerously smooth. If they want a fight, I'll give them one. She turned to Marcus. Get me an interview. Prime time, national news. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone. On it. Vanessa took one last glance at the supermarket through her rearview mirror. They thought they could humiliate her. Now she was about to humiliate them. Vanessa's mind was already racing as Marcus made calls. If the police department wanted to spin the narrative, she would beat them at their own game on the largest stage possible. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text from one of the top news networks, GNN News. They were requesting an exclusive live interview that very night. Vanessa smirked. Perfect. Lock in GNN, she told Marcus. Prime time. I want the whole country watching. Marcus nodded, firing off a response. They've confirmed. 8 p.m. sharp. Vanessa leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment. She could already picture how this would play out. She would tell her story, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been profiled, humiliated, or silenced. By evening, Vanessa arrived at the GNN studio. The atmosphere was buzzing. Producers and journalists whispered as she walked in, some recognizing her, others only just learning who she really was. The anchor, Lisa Grant, one of the top journalists in the country, greeted her with a firm handshake. Ms. Cole, thank you for agreeing to speak with us. Vanessa's smile was polite, but her eyes were sharp. Thank you for giving me the platform. The cameras rolled. The red light blinked on. Lisa began the interview. Earlier today, footage surfaced showing you being harassed by 2 police officers at your own supermarket chain. The police department has since released a statement claiming the officers were simply following protocol. What's your response to that? Vanessa's smile faded. She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but full of power. My response is simple, Lisa. This isn't about protocol. It's about prejudice. Those officers didn't see a woman shopping. They saw a black woman who they decided didn't belong. They made assumptions based on how I looked, not on what I was doing. Lisa nodded, her eyes serious. Some might argue that the officers were just doing their jobs. What would you say to that? Vanessa's eyes locked on the camera. If harassing innocent people is what their job requires, then the system itself is broken. And I won't stop until it's fixed, not just for myself, but for every person who's ever been humiliated for simply existing. The studio was dead silent. Even the crew stopped what they were doing to listen. Vanessa continued, her voice unwavering. I'm not just demanding apologies, I'm demanding accountability. I'm calling for an independent investigation into the police department's profiling practices. I'm calling for mandatory racial bias training, and I'm challenging every business owner and leader watching this to stand up and demand better. By the time the interview ended, social media was on fire. The hashtags number Justice for All and number Billionaire Avenger were trending worldwide. Vanessa didn't just own businesses, she was becoming the face of a movement. As she walked out of the studio, Marcus greeted her with a proud smile. You just made history. Vanessa's eyes sparkled, but her voice was calm. This is just the beginning. As Vanessa stepped outside the GNN studio, the night air was crisp, but the fire in her heart burned hotter. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name, and people on the street stopped to cheer. She had done more than expose 2 officers, she had ignited a nationwide conversation. Marcus walked beside her, phone in hand. Vanessa, we're getting calls from everywhere. Activists, lawmakers, even corporate CEOs want to talk. Vanessa smirked. Good, that means they're feeling the pressure. Just then, her phone rang. This time, it was an unexpected caller, the Chief of Police, Harold Whitmore. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Well, now this should be interesting. She answered the call. Chief Whitmore, to what do I owe the honor? The chief's voice was gruff, but careful. Ms. Cole, I think we need to talk. Vanessa leaned against her car. You're right. We do need to talk. But let me guess, you're not calling to apologize. You're calling because you're losing control of the situation. The chief sighed. Look, I won't pretend this doesn't look bad, but if you keep pushing this, it's going to make the whole department look corrupt. Vanessa laughed coldly. And? Maybe it is corrupt, Chief. I'm offering a compromise, Whitmore said quickly. The 2 officers in question, they'll be fired immediately. We'll also issue a public apology. Vanessa's jaw tightened. That's not enough? Whitmore hesitated. What do you want? Vanessa's voice was firm. I want systemic change, an independent oversight committee to monitor police behavior, body cameras required for all officers, and a full investigation into racial profiling cases past and present. The chief's breath hitched. Vanessa, that's a lot. Vanessa smirked. No, Chief, that's the bare minimum. Silence. Then Whitmore finally spoke. Give me 48 hours. Vanessa exhaled. You have 24. And with that, she hung up. Marcus looked at her, shaking his head with a proud smile. You really don't back down, do you? Vanessa slid into her car and smirked. Why would I? I own this game now. The next morning, headlines dominated every major news outlet. Billionaire Vanessa Cole takes on corrupt police system and wins. The footage from the supermarket, the GNN interview, and the police chief's reluctant agreement had all gone viral. True to her word, Vanessa didn't back down. Within 24 hours, the police department announced the immediate termination of the two officers. But more importantly, under mounting public pressure, the mayor approved an independent oversight committee, new bias training policies, and mandatory body cameras for all officers in the city. It wasn't just a victory for Vanessa, it was a victory for justice. As she sat in her office, sipping coffee and scrolling through the outpouring of support online, Marcus walked in. "Vanessa, you just changed the game," he said with a proud grin. "The police reform groups want you to speak at their national summit. You've started something huge." Vanessa smiled, setting down her mug. "Good," she said, "because this fight isn't over." She had walked into a supermarket as just another customer. Now she was walking out as a force of change, and the world was watching.